Stamp prices have begun to rise thanks to Postmaster Louis DeJoy's quest to make the USPS self-sustaining as a business. This is all part of the 10-year Delivering for America plan that boasts various improvements to the Postal Service as well as a promise to build an electric vehicle delivery fleet. DeJoy is, of course, the Trump-appointed business dude who made headlines for having ties to his old company XPO Logistics, of which he still owns a $30 million stake. If you recall, XPO is a freight transportation company with about 100 contracts with the Postal Service. And so at the time, it sure seemed like yet another case of Trump appointing one of his ghoul friends to make a few extra bucks carving out a government institution in the name of privatization. The reality, as we talked about in our last video on it, is that the post office has long been in a twilight between a private entity and government service. Of course, it really seems that, logically speaking, we should be working toward the latter. So many Americans rely on the USPS, and so trying to make it financially compete with the digital age as a company seems like you're setting this vital service up to fail. Shouldn't the goal be to simply try and bring this crumbling institution into the modern age? Those electric vehicles seem like a good start, except it turns out that DeJoy has opted to make the new fleet only 10% electric, while making the rest not only gas-powered trucks, but trucks that only get 8.6 miles per gallon. I'm not sure if you can tell, but this appears to be the exact opposite of what we all expected for a new sustainable fleet. And now several states are even suing the post office over this decision. It seems like DeJoy is purposefully waging a direct war on Mother Nature as if he caught her his wife or something. But the reality is far more depressing and far less erotic, as the simple reason for this change is that DeJoy found that buying all electric trucks was far too expensive for the USPS budget. Because again, he's been tasked with trying to make a profit, and so as a business ghoul, he is doing exactly what he should be doing with that task. It's like asking a great white shark to euthanize your pet, and then getting mad that it doesn't do it humanely, you know? You want the capitalism guy to do a capitalism on the post office. Well, guess what capitalism isn't good for? The damn environment. Also lots of other stuff. So what is the Biden of it all? Surely that old moose has a finger or two to point into DeJoy's chest. Perhaps he'll even say, "Listen here, Buster Bubby," and put him in an old guy headlock. Then they'll kiss. My point being that while Biden can't directly fire DeJoy, he can bring on new members to the board of governors that oversees the USPS. And of course, he can vocalize his displeasure for the course laid out by this Trump appointee. Do a little bullying, perhaps. Call him a jack-faced horse bee diddler, or one of his other classics. After all, he's probably not at all happy about what's that? Do I even need to relay what the ear spider is telling me? Okay, fine. So it turns out that Biden did indeed replace a few board members, but those new members voted in a guy named Roman Martinez, a retired investment banker who was picked by Trump as the new board chair. In fact, it sure seems that Biden himself has backed DeJoy, having just signed legislation that will give him financial freedom to reform the USPS any way he sees fit. So what happened? Could it be that we are all a bunch of lib-faced horse cucks who got triggered when Daddy Trump hired a perfectly capable postmaster general? And is DeJoy actually a positive force for the post office? Well, it's not that. But also it's not that. Or is it? No. What it comes down to is this. If you truly believe that the post office should be a for-profit business that competes with Amazon and other delivery companies, then Louis DeJoy isn't doing a half-bad job at accomplishing that goal. While some of his more irritating tactics are to raise stamp prices and slow delivery times, he's also implementing ideas that are, to be frank, good. Never mind whether or not they are designed to make a profit. For example, since 2010, the USPS has relied on contractors and other non-permanent employees to save costs on things like benefits. This has actually resulted in a very high turnover rate, which DeJoy is now looking to change by converting thousands of non-career employees into permanent positions. He also created an online USPS dashboard showing delivery times, and wants to modernize the current facilities and focus a portion of them on package processing in order to compete with Amazon. Packages are, after all, the main thing we use the mail for now. But probably the most important of all, well, do you recall this section from our previous video?
And instead of creating a way to keep it afloat during the age of Electro-M's, the Postal Accountability and Enhancement Act served as a way to step even harder on the post office's neck, specifically by requiring the Postal Service to prepay retiree health benefits, the cost of which adding up to roughly $5 billion a year. Now, to be clear, this is something that no other federal agency is required to do, and by 2012 caused the USPS to begin defaulting on the payments, the grand total of which has grown to $47.2 billion.
That's old innocent me talking about when the GOP and George Bush used the Postal Accountability and Enhancement Act to make the USPS prepay health benefits, and how no other agency had to do that, and how it completely the post office in an age of electro-Ms, which we now, of course, call zappy mailies. It put the USPS into debt, to be specific. In that video, we also highlighted how postmasters under Obama also seemed to hate the post office, and stressed how Louis DeJoy, to his credit at the time, told Congress that perhaps they should change the legislation forcing the post office to make money. We built a real solid case that DeJoy was simply part of a larger pattern of our government trying to kill the post office by forcing it to be profitable, and anyone in charge of that task really had no choice but to do terrible things. But the reason I brought up this healthcare clip is that, wouldn't you know it, part of this new Reform Act DeJoy spearheaded has relieved the USPS of all that past debt. Plus, required postal retirees to enroll in Medicare in order to avoid additional debt. That's like a good thing. Something I quite frankly did not expect anyone to fix. So to recap this, the modern USPS has always been founded on the terrible notion that it needs to turn a profit through its postage sales, and has a rich history of doing things the same way a shitty business might. And since the age of zappy mailies, it has not only struggled, but been deliberately attacked by the GOP. And once Trump showed up, he clearly took a specialized interest in mail-in votes, making everyone rightfully assume he was going to seriously with the USPS and hired DeJoy specifically to help with that. Then that, election stuff happened, and we got Biden in charge, and DeJoy didn't go anywhere, nor did Biden raise a stink about him. And that's probably because Biden is essentially a Republican, in that he loves the status quo and maintaining it. And part of that status quo is the fantasy that the post office should make money and be operated like a business. And so while there still are Democrats pissed off about this, specifically the price increases and delivery time extensions that are, like everything bad, going to affect lower income areas and elderly people the most, while some are still mad at that, Biden clearly isn't one of those people. And to his, let's say, credit, DeJoy appears to be just another boring cog in that status quo machine, not at all beholden to his previous boss. Is he good? I don't know. Not really. But he also wasn't a complete disaster and has actually done some things to help. Things that even the American Postal Workers Union has praised him for. It actually seems like this could be some kind of redemption arc if we were all secretly in a TV show, which of course we are not. Hey, thanks for watching that clip. Here's the evergreen end plate to ask you to like and subscribe. It's any day of the year where you are.